Even if you just have like, if there's already been coffee in your cup, just use another mug that's the same size. Or, a measuring cup or something.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. That's very reasonable. Okay.
Easy solutions to hard problems.
I just want to
doing
be.
things with Ruby.
I want to be frustrated in my ways. I'm not changing. I'm 31 years old now. I'm never going to change again.
Oh my God, I'm older than you. Oh, the horror.
When's your birthday?
March 27th, 1990.
March. Okay, I was gonna say I'm a February baby, but you still got like 11 months on me.
I'm an old bitch. I wear this hat to cover up all my gray hair.
You're way older than me. Well, let me ask. This is off topic, but did you? I know when I went from 29 to 30, that felt traumatic. Like it really affected me. Have you ever had that?
No, and a lot of my friends have kind of had that, I guess, like flip of consciousness, and I don't know if it's because I've been alone like my whole life, and I'm not exaggerating when I say my whole life, that I've always felt a lot older than I am because I was forced to grow up really soon. So like, I don't know, turning 20, I was like, oh my God, I'm kind of an actual adult now. But then turning 30, I was like, I have a 10-year-old child.
Right.
Like, I'm an adult now.
You were already, an adult by that point.
What was scarier, I think, to me than like actually turning a different age was like changing my job at 31, like getting my driver's license at 32, things that people, going back to school at 25 was scary as fuck because I was like, I'm 25. People were expecting me to do this 5 years ago. Like I should have been done this and already in my career for several years now. So I guess my crisis of conscience when it comes to those things isn't necessarily wrapped around age. It's wrapped around milestones.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've felt the same way. Like I'm finishing or attempting to finish my degree. So I was just in classes, like a month ago, I was in classes and I felt old. I was like, I would chat with some of my peers who are 18, 19, and like legit could not understand what they were talking about a lot of the time. It's like, man, this is what it's like. Like I vaguely remember being like 14 or whatever, and my uncles or whoever would kind of talk about like what are young kids talking about. They would make comments like that. I'm that old guy now. I'm like so disconnected. Like I've had younger coworkers that aren't even in their 20s yet, and yeah, I legit like they might as well be from Japan or something. Like I just can't understand them. Don't know what's going on. It's a total culture shock, and that's me being super ageist. But yeah, definitely the milestone thing. That's something I've talked with my therapist about. I should talk to him about it a bit more because I forget what he said. But you can't, I know it's unhealthy to compare yourself to others, right? Like I'm certain he said that to me. And he is someone that changed his career in his, I think he said he was 32 when he started pursuing psychology. So it's really easy to compare yourself to the person that just like shot through school, knowing exactly what they wanted to do and did everything.
Yeah, we've talked about that. Like we have friends that are doctors and stuff that like they always knew that's what they wanted to do and they were just like super focused.
Laser focused, yeah. Not me. Actually, the last thing I was just talking to another therapist. I have so many therapists, but I'm working on having structured time. And to me, it's like, dude, you're 31 and you're only just like learning how to structure your time and like make a calendar and keep a timetable and stuff like that. Like this is like,
I still can't do that.
This is like shit that 12-year-olds should be doing or something, or I don't even know, but certainly not, by the time, but better late than never, right? Like I'm not going to sit around refusing to learn how to structure my time better. It'll suit me. It'll improve my mental health. I know that. So I just kind of got to suck it up and do it. It's never too late. Better late than never.
Hey. I mean, if I ever do get married, it'll be based on, you know, like knowing myself well enough. I'm going to be well into my 50s.
mm,
And that's
yeah,
if I like met somebody tomorrow and was like, yes, we're going to do this for a long time.
yeah, it'll take a little while. And yeah, I thought it was funny. My previous girlfriend, we had done like everything backwards. We met while volunteering, and it was a situation where they took a bunch of people and put us in a house. And so we
Okay.
lived together before we had met. We moved in together, you know? And it's like the relation, all the milestones were in like reverse order. So, hey, nothing is like set in stone. You know what I mean? Like, this is something we see in these articles about social media, is like expectations and distorted reality. Like, people get things in their head that things have to happen at a certain time. You know, 25, I have to be done school. I have to be well on my way to being a doctor. I already know the person I'm going to marry and have 15 kids with and all this. No, like, it's just
15 children in this economy,
yeah, right.
even as a doctor.
And that is something worth talking about too, is like, you and me in our lifetime, the world has changed so much in terms of like economics and things like that. Like, every week there's some once a generation recession. We've been through like 10 of them. You know what I mean? Like, they just keep happening. Pandemics, insane shootings and stuff like that. Like, I truly don't think the world was as insane as it is now. I don't think things were quite that insane 50 years ago, or people just didn't know how insane things were. You know what I mean?
I don't even think that it's people didn't know. There was a lot less people, so there's a lot less chance of dumbass shit happening.
That is true.
Even though it seems like really trivial to us, some of the things that people in, say the 40s and 50s, 60s experienced, because those things, were taught to us as history, so we don't see them the same way. Like, those breaking incidences were probably terrifying to those people because they'd never experienced anything like that before.
Yeah. So they might have been less prepared than we might be.
Right? Although we experience things at a higher accelerated rate, human beings have been evolving at an perpetually accelerated rate for 200 years. So it's not necessarily, I think, that more crazy stuff has happened to us or crazier stuff has happened to us. It's just that there's more of us, so it happens more often.
Yeah. And everybody's got a camera, so it's like everything's documented. I think, was that in your article where they talk about ignorance is bliss, but there's no more ignorance, right? Like, you have an internet connection with Google, you can find out anything at all, whether it's true or not. That's a whole other aspect too, is like,
I think we talked about that in our last podcast too, before I even sent this article. Because that was one of the points that I made about how human evolution is so much faster than we think it is, because we literally can't be ignorant anymore. You can't choose to be that way. That one point right there is probably 80% of the frustration I feel on a day-to-day basis. Because I'm a person who, if a resource is available to me, before I ask questions because I don't want to look like an idiot, I will use every resource available to me to try and find the answer.
Right.
B, again, I've just been by myself for a long time, so I don't rely on other people to do things for me or to give me information. I have to use the world around me for context and clues and information. So, I mean, like, I'm sure that there's things that I'm ignorant to and I don't even know I'm ignorant to them.
Yeah.
But if somebody pointed it out to me, I'd be like, oh, and then I would go on a deep dive and fucking read everything I could about it to not be ignorant anymore, because you can't choose to be that way in modern society and be taken seriously. You just can't.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's certainly a change there, because I think there's still some people that choose to be that way, and they have their supporters that are like clinging on to ignorance for dear life. There's some cognitive biases there where people assume that they know everything, essentially. Like, the world is as they see it.
I don't even necessarily think it's always people just being, I guess, comfortable in their ignorance. I think it's that they hold idols in their life that tell them that they should be ignorant, that information around them is either untrustworthy or untrue.
Yeah, you certainly see that attitude, that perspective shows up a
Like
lot.
look at Trump. His entire platform was built on him telling people to be ignorant of the media and ignorant of resources that are available to them.
Yeah. And a lot of people chose ignorance, you know.
Absolutely they did, because it's much safer and it makes you feel more comfortable to be propped up by what you already know to be true, as opposed to challenging ideas that you either have had for a very long time or have been taught to you over a long time to change. That's just, you know, I think that's a part of human nature. We just want to believe that what we know is right. And we see a lot of that in social media as well, with people not wanting to see contradictory information. And I think we saw it a lot more during the pandemic with like anti-vax stuff, but it's definitely not an uncommon problem.
Yeah.
I think would be a good way to say it.
You know, the world is full of contradictory information. And if you're like, you know, yourself or myself, where I like to do research, right? You've said you like to go on those deep dives and understand things. You know, you can encounter things that are kind of, you know, counter to each other, contradictory information. You know, there's so many examples and all of them seem controversial to me. I don't want to get into it, but the idea that you're, you know, if you find some information that seems to contradict, you or I might want to try and reconcile it to understand what the situation is. That process is stressful, right? Because you're dealing with unknowns. Oftentimes you're dealing with things that seem to be institutions or something like that, right? Like just the idea that a police officer can cause harm or something like that. You know what I mean? Like you're taught as a kid, police officers are to be trusted. And well, I mean, that's what I was taught. Maybe things are different for minority kids today. I'm not sure there's a lot of Black parents telling their kids to trust the police.
I've talked about it with you before about how even though Zephyr and I are white presenting, that we still have conversations about how people of authority, especially people like police officers, can be unfair and violent towards people of color. And that if he experiences it or he sees someone experiencing it, he needs to talk to someone like immediately. You don't, you know, you don't put it off and be like, oh, whatever. And I think that speaks more to maybe how people's moral compass, I guess, sways them in that final decision of like trying to reconcile that conflicting information. Because I mean, like, I was taught my whole life that I should trust police officers. I have police officers in my family. Are they good people and have they upheld the law the way that they're supposed to the best of my knowledge? I don't ride around with them every day, but I want to believe that they're good people. If I saw them committing violence against someone of a minority, would I do something about it? Absolutely. You know, but that's because my moral compass tells me that it doesn't matter who you are or what the situation is. You're not violent against another human being. Right. Yeah. But there's definitely people, and in this specific context of like police violence and brutality, who think that if someone is of a conflicting opinion or is perceived as harm, even though they might not actually be harmful to you, that your response is violence. And I think that the way that you perceive things on your moral compass really affects those final decisions on whether or not you feel information to be, you know, true and correct, whether it's contradicted or not.
Yeah. Perspective is so much. We actually, this might be a decent segue into talking about movies, because this was something we brought up earlier. We should talk about how mental health is portrayed in films. And you went and posted a whole bunch of clips, or not clips, but titles. It seems like you did a bit of research. And I was really impressed.
Wouldn't call it research, just like, you know, I guess I've always had this thought in the back of my head. But if we want to do boop, 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 research, like we certainly can.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about this a little bit because what does it mean? This is the question I was asking myself, is like, what does it mean to represent mental health in a film? You know, and we can expand to video games and music and whatever. That's not a problem. But
I mean, even in that list, I was like, I tried to stay away from documentaries and television and stick specifically to movies based on like fictional or fictionalized versions of events.
Yeah. I think that's
because
a
it
good,
means different things in different contexts.
For sure, absolutely. So when I was kind of thinking about these movies, there sort of two trends emerged in my perspective, and that is like you have films that are from maybe a removed perspective, where you're seeing maybe somebody who has a mental illness, how they interact with their community, with their family, what challenges they face, and things like that. And then you might have a film that attempts to put the audience in the perspective of someone suffering mental illness. So all I'm saying is like how, you know, some movies, if you have a character that experiences hallucinations and things like that, you could make two movies that show how it affects this person's ability to exist and how it challenges them in society. Or you can make a movie that attempts to make you feel like you're hallucinating. And I think both of those are very valid. And I think I'm more interested in the ones that put the audience in the perspective of somebody who's experiencing something that other people maybe don't, whether it be addiction, you know, hallucinations or delusions, you know, even codependency or anything like that. I like movies that attempt to cultivate empathy on behalf of whoever's suffering. So there's an interesting film called M from the 1930s. It's a German film, and it's about a child murderer. And throughout the entire film, it's not really about the child murderer, but more about the effect it has on the community and how everybody becomes very paranoid and very upset, and the police aren't effective, and it becomes a political matter and stuff like that. But what surprised me was at the end of the movie, when they capture him, spoilers for a movie that's 100 years old, when they capture him, the film kind of swerves and takes a sympathetic approach to the child murderer. Throughout the whole movie, he's played like a monster and everybody's afraid of him. And he's sort of lurking in alleyways and things like that. And then when they capture him and he kind of has a moment to speak, he talks about how he's upset. He doesn't want to kill kids. Like he sort of acknowledges in a tragic way that he is ill and he has no support.
So it's an adult person who's killing children or a child who's killing children?
Oh, it's an adult person. I realize now how I said that. No, it's not a murderer. Okay, it's an adult man that murders children, not a child that is a serial killer.
That's a little different.
It's a little bit different, yeah. But I forget exactly what he says, but he sort of expresses how he's alone and he recognizes that he's unwell and he doesn't know what to do. And it surprised me because the movie was from like the 30s and I don't expect things at media to be that compassionate towards mental illness for that area. I just don't expect it. So the fact that they did that and did it quite well, I thought that was really surprising. But I'm really interested in movies that cultivate empathy on behalf of people that are suffering. So maybe films like, Requiem for a Dream, where you start to understand why these people are addicted to heroin, or why in that film the mother is addicted to like television. It helps you understand.
She was addicted to television. She was addicted to speed.
To speed?
Yeah, that's what that medication was that she was taking.
Oh, and yeah,
basically meth.
And she gets obsessed with like the is it a game show, kind of like Price is Right or something? Yeah.
Like everyone in that movie was a drug addict for different reasons, but they were all drug addicts.
Yeah,
kind of like Trainspotting, right?
Yes, that's another great example.
It took a more comedic approach, I thought, to that kind of epidemic that was happening at that time in the UK. But
the scene that comes to mind immediately is in Trainspotting when Ewan McGregor's character is
in the toilets.
Yeah, that's a great scene just from the filmmaking. But I was thinking about the scene where he's detoxifying or whatever. They're doing the cold turkey. They lock him in the room. They're trying to sober him up, and he's going through withdrawal, and he's hallucinating. And you get the sense that he's hot and cold at the same time, and he's so restless. And you start to feel that, and you're like, man, I can.
As a person who has been through those things, like actually done it, it was very haunting to experience. And I mean, like, there's been several movies, especially when it comes to drug addiction specifically, that when I was a young person and I was really early on in my sobriety, like I absolutely just couldn't watch them. Requiem for a Dream was one of them, because I had seen it when I was on drugs. And so it kind of like triggered those same emotions. But watching those things and having a visceral experience, not only on top of like the psychological experience of intaking a form of media, was like wild. Like I remember watching Trainspotting. I think I was maybe 24 or 25. Zephyr was like a little kid. And like I had to turn it off halfway through because I was getting like cold sweats. And like experiencing the things that one would experience and just being like, I can't do this. I can't do this right now. I can't spiral like that. So, I mean, it's interesting to see how film evokes those types of emotions when you as a human being have experienced them. And I think that goes a lot to, I think about how and we've had this conversation before, how our kind of like veil of Hollywood glitter has been lifted in the last few years, and you tend to find filmmaking, at least modern filmmaking, is a lot more, I guess, connected to human experience as opposed to like a weird kind of almost step forwardian kind of view of it, where it's like it's there, but we're gonna put a pretty little shimmer on everything,
Yeah, I think part of that is it's affected by, everybody has a phone now. So I imagine everybody by the time they're, 14 has seen a video of somebody out there in the world having some kind of mental health crisis, right? Like it's very easy to find pictures of perhaps
if you live in an urban center, you've seen it not even just through a screen, like you physically see it with your own eyeballs.
Yeah. But it's like it's ubiquitous, and as you mentioned, it's like you can't simply put a nice polished Hollywood sheen on it to make it nice, because I think people will recognize that it's inauthentic, right? I'm reminded of the film Saving Private Ryan. I remember reading that a lot of veterans that film opens with the invasion of Normandy, and people that had legit been there, like 60 years before or whatever, saw the film and became very upset, saying that it was so realistic, right? Like they did such a good job presenting that. So I'm like, what's the mental health equivalent to a scene like that, or a piece of media that is just so authentic and so well understood by the filmmakers, that someone such as yourself maybe personally is affected or can attribute to its legitimacy, right? Like in Trainspotting. And on the flip side, what are the awful presentations of mental illness, right? Like one that comes to mind. I
had some on that list.
Yeah. Are you thinking about, the movie 12 Monkeys? Do you know that one?
I have never seen it.
Oh,
isn't Brad Pitt in that one?
Yes. And he plays, it's been a while since I watched it, but I was watching clips of it this morning, and he plays somebody who's got something going on and he's in a mental hospital. And it's a committed performance, but as I was watching the clips, I was like, what is he doing? Because he's doing a lot of like physical stuff, and he's like twitching his eyes. And to me, it seemed like he was playing it up a bit theatrically without being informed by anything too real. It's entertaining for sure, but I was trying to figure it out. I'm like, it doesn't seem authentic.
There's I feel like there's maybe some actors who have kind of a track record of almost being or putting themselves in these roles that they think they can take on when they clearly don't have these experiences, and Brad Pitt's one of them, because Fight Club was one of the ones. I guess for some context, I put together a list of movies that I had personally seen that I felt really fit what we were trying to talk about. Movies that I had seen that kind of missed the mark, and then movies that people around the internet felt really embodied this kind of good representation of mental health in film. And Fight Club was one that was brought up a lot. It was on almost every list I looked at. And although it's stellar performances from the entire cast, do I think it accurately represents what a mental break like that would look like? Not really. You know, like, do I really think that if Tyler Durden was a real person and he was experiencing dissociative personality disorder, that he would immediately join a fighting ring and murder people to make them into soap? Absolutely not. Like, that's such a dramatic turn. And although it plays really well on film and it makes you feel things, and it, you know, evokes that almost sense of like pity and sympathy and empathy for this character, because, you know, he goes through this like almost loss of self, and then an attempt at finding love with the what's her face, and then the ultimate rejection of that, and then realizing that like all of this is kind of made up in his head. It just, do I really think that's how a person experiences that? No, I don't. And there's a lot of things that I feel kind of fell into that. Sean Penn was another one. Tom Cruise has done a few movies that I felt like probably fell into that. And, you know, do I feel like it's something that we're trying to move past as a society? Yes. Is there better mental health representation in film and in like feature films now? Slightly. Do I think people should hold actors accountable for their really bad portrayals or portrayals of things of that nature in general? Yes. Do I really think that we need to stop treating mental health crises and mental health diseases the same? Absolutely. Because I think that there's a lot of, and I made that point on the list as well, that there's a lot of representation that you see that really just paints mental health in a way that's too general, and it's not pointed enough, and it kind of leaves people with the notion after seeing a piece of media like that, that that's how all people experience that type of either situation or tragedy, or, you know, I guess portrayal of life. Johnny Depp was on that list a lot too, with things like Benny and June and What's Eating Gilbert Grape. Although those are great pieces of entertainment, I think that specifically those two movies and the way that they portray autism were not only really harmful at that time, but are still really harmful. And the fact that nobody talks about that is really troublesome.
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot to talk about there for sure. I haven't seen Benny and June.
I could talk about films all day long, my dude.
Yeah, I haven't seen Benny and June, but I do vaguely recall What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and Leo DiCaprio, really young, playing, I think he's the younger brother, and is he autistic? I forget. Another really committed performance.
Fun fact about that specific performance, it was one of Leonardo DiCaprio's like first kind of like big box films, and he did such a great job that when he showed up to the red carpet for that movie for opening night, people were actually surprised that he's not autistic.
I remember being very impressed.
Great job. You know, like, it's great that he put himself in such a place that he could really embody that and show people what it looks like or can look like. But then for people to just gloss over the fact that he's not actually autistic and then continue to treat him like he was, really harmful. Just saying. Or when they could have just hired an autistic actor.
Yeah, well, that's something that's probably we're talking about is you know, authenticity in who gets the roles. There's a lot of arguments to be made either way. I think generally I land on no, if you have an identity, a character with a specific identity, it's like make a reasonable casting choice. I just don't think, if you only hire people that legitimately fit into the identity that you're casting in a character, right? Like, should you hire a Black actor to play a Black character? Yeah, if that's important to the role. But should you hire, only gay actors to play gay characters? It's like, well, sure, we want to see representation. We want those folks to get the jobs. But like, how specific do we get? Like if you have a character that's, a Romanian, suffer of vitiligo with schizophrenia or something, it's like you're just becoming so specific. Where are you going to find that person? Can you hire someone with schizophrenia to play a schizophrenic? I mean, I'm sure there's a spectrum of how difficult schizophrenia is, but like, I think some folks, as long as the role is informed by reality, I don't think you should be that strict about who you're hiring. This is really all I'm trying to say. Things better be, they should be better informed for sure. They should be realistic. But I think if you play that game, it's just going to get so specific, and
I think that
you're going
there's
to end up with the
definitely
same movie being made over and over again.
Well, I mean, there's certain lines that I think shouldn't be crossed. Like, the question of race is a hard rule. That's a hard rule.
Yeah.
Like, you don't hire someone who's not a person of color to play a person of color. We still see that in film, and it's really troublesome, but it's slowly going away. I thought a really great example of why you shouldn't do it anymore was Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder. Like, the parody of that was just so good.
Yeah, that so is good.
But such a lot of people didn't get it, which like also sucked. But
well, it's crazy to see a famous white actor like in blackface, not like a joke blackface, but like, it's so funny. I can't think of any other movie where that's done and people like accept it. And I know in the context of the film, it makes sense because he's supposed to be this absolutely ridiculous character. So it is a joke, only the most ridiculous people would think that this is like acceptable or something like that. But it's crazy to me that like modern audiences accepted that. There wasn't a huge pushback. Like, what the fuck? Robert Downey Jr. in blackface?
Well, I mean, the whole point of that character was to be like, he knows that he's a white guy and that he's doing something wrong and that he has a responsibility as an actor to not do that thing. And I think that maybe, at least at the time, because Tropic Thunder came out in the mid 2000s?
Yeah, I don't know, 2006? I don't know.
Right? Like, it was at a time where like comedy farce was still like very, what I would call slapsticky. Like
it was the same era of like Will Ferrell's hits, like Anchorman and Talladega Nights and stuff.
Wasn't he in Tropic Thunder?
He's not one of the
like Jay Baruchel, Jack Black. I feel like Will Ferrell was in it, but either way.
Yeah, I think he's in a couple scenes.
Like, I remember Tom Cruise at the end dancing, and he was like wearing that ridiculous giant nose.
Fat suit. Yeah.
Fat suit.
And he's bald. Yeah, he's like.
So, I think at the time it probably flew over a lot of people's heads because we weren't at a point as a society where we really understood the implications of a white person playing a person of color. Whereas like now, if you do that in a film, you'd be vilified immediately. Like, that shit wouldn't even get past the funding stage. Like, whoever was casting it and they tried to do that, they'd be fired immediately. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Where are you from? The 1930s? What is this?
Can't believe you would even suggest this. Yeah.
Right. But I think that because mental health is such a different and newer topic, it's less likely for someone to call the bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, 40 years ago, a white person playing a person of color and just putting on blackface probably would have been fine. People would have been like, it's risky, but let's do it.
Yeah.
And then that same mentality is applied to portraying mental health diseases. You know, like, I don't want to necessarily say crises, because everyone experiences those no matter what your race is.